All right, it looks like we're recording. So thanks for joining me for Big Game Field Dressing course today at the Bow 2020 virtual weekend. It's kind of a different event for us, doing it all virtual. I will introduce myself a little bit more because I see a lot of new faces, which is exciting. So my name's Becky Wallen. I work for Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources, and I've been hunting deer since I was 11 years old. I started getting into it with my dad, who learned, he was probably in his mid-30s before he started hunting with some buddies that he worked with at the fire department. So we actually kind of learned together. I went to conservation camp that is run by Kentucky Fish and Wildlife, and would bring back all my knowledge and share it with Dad, and we would apply it in the field. And I never got out of it. When I went to school, I studied wildlife management at Eastern and was around a group of friends that were hunting, and we kind of did that as a group. I started mentoring in college. The guy that I married is a hunter, so I've just that's what's kept me into it, that social support. And somehow I'm always the one that's field dressing. So I don't mind it so bad. It's not the most glorious part of your harvest, but it does have to get done. And there's a little bit of time constraints in there, which we're going to talk about. So I have perfected that skill. And trust me, if you can too, you'll have hunting buddies for life if you say, hey, I'll field dress your deer. This presentation, we're going to cover quite a bit, and probably a little bit more than you expected to, which, something I always love about attending a class is learning something I didn't expect to learn. So hopefully you walk away feeling that way today. So I'm going to start sharing my screen now. And all right, can you see my presentation? Excellent.
Yes.
Excellent. And I can see some of you, so if you nod your heads and stuff too, I can see that. All right, let's go. Okay, so this is my next question, and I really want you to dive deep. I'm really curious to know, let's see, have you ever field dressed an animal before with or without help? So if you could answer that in the chat, and I am going to try and pull the chat up really quick. Ooh. Sorry. My chat won't pop up. Okay, so I was going to try and follow along, but Brent, if you can let me know.
Yep. Although somehow I just got out of screen share. Switch to screen share. There we go. Okay. So lots of chatter, which is fantastic. Y'all keep it up. Do you want me to read them? What people are answering? Or gist of it is, we've got a lot of people who have either never done it or have done it with a little bit of supervision or have watched it. So lots of people like myself who would not be super confident trying to do it by themselves in the field, I would imagine.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Brent. Sorry, I didn't
welcome.
Anticipate that. I was
Probably can't screen share and look at the chat at the same time, I bet.
I was able to just a minute ago. Well, I don't know what changed. But I hope you all are comfortable continuing to answer questions and letting Brent read them to me. Sorry about that. Okay, so what emotions arise for you when you think about processing wild game meat on your own? I'm curious, and I might I could see, I would call on a few people. If anybody wants to share and come off mute, that's more than welcome.
Hey, Becky. I get excited about it because I'm a nurse, so I kind of like the idea of seeing all the insides there.
Yes, that's awesome, Jessica. Yeah. I love taking nurses out or vet students that are just as nerdy as I am about the organs and where everything is. That's cool. Thanks. Anybody else?
I think it's very cool because I work in a taxidermy shop, and it makes me, I guess, more aware of the deer that I'm working on and all the anatomy and stuff like that, just to knowing where all the muscles and stuff are.
Yeah, that is awesome. Thanks, Caitlin. Man, taxidermy, that would be really cool.
I'm kind of excited about trying to do it my first time.
Yeah. Awesome, Michael. Thanks. Well, go ahead, Brent.
Oh, I was just going to tell you, not everybody is quite as excited. Although I personally appreciate everybody's scientific curiosity. I'm right there with you. Looks like a couple people maybe are a little bit reserved.
Understandable.
Yep.
Yes. I totally understand. I remember my first year harvest. I was actually with my mom. I told you I started hunting with my dad, but my mom went along with me because my dad was a firefighter. So he was actually working, and it was youth weekend. Mom said, "Oh, I'll go sit with you." I don't think she expected me to actually harvest something, especially my first year. So, but I did. I was successful, and I remember calling Dad on the flip phone and saying, "Hey, Dad, what do you do after you shoot a deer?" And he was like, "What?" And we wound up having a neighbor come help us who just happened to be hunting that day too. He field dressed it for us. So I didn't field dress my first year, but after that, Dad, he really helped me go through the process. And it is very different in the beginning if you've never seen it before. And hopefully the videos will be a soft introduction to that today. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to have to move your faces so I can see. All right, so a couple of considerations about field dressing big game. If you're using a bow and you haven't found your broadhead, you want to be extra careful. So I actually almost learned this the hard way. When I harvested my first year using a crossbow last fall, the broadheads that I were using actually unscrewed, and I wasn't expecting them to do that after they had entered the deer. So when I retrieved my deer and pulled the arrow out, it was actually missing 2 of the 3 blades on the broadhead. So I had to be extra careful when I was in the chest cavity because I didn't know where they actually ended up. So definitely keep that in mind. And you'll see these gold or yellow words are the ones you're going to fill in on your worksheet if you want to. You can use gravity to your advantage for sure. So it doesn't have to be a huge slope, but if you can angle the animal that you're field dressing either with the butt going downhill or the body on one side where the opening in the cavity, basically along the midline, along the stomach is facing downhill, gravity is going to help you roll those guts out. So I have done it near, my parents live in the knobs of Kentucky, so we've always had a hill to use to our advantage. But I've also been able to use like a little dip that went down into a dry creek bed. And it wasn't very tall at all, but it was just enough to help. It's always nice to have a helper, but I want to tell you it is not impossible. You can do it alone, and there's plenty of tools out there now to help. And we'll talk about, hopefully, a decent selection of them that you might be interested in. Before you begin, make sure that you record your harvest. on your harvest log in Kentucky. That's the law. You have to record, write down on your harvest log whether you harvested a deer or an elk. And so I wanted to bring that up because our big game, you have to record before you start processing or field dressing or move the animal at all. So that's the law, and that's why I wanted to bring it up today. Choose a location that's shady and cool. I have not done this, and it was a huge mistake because it may take you a little bit longer than you anticipate. And if you're early season hunting, it can get really warm really fast. So after you fill out your harvest log, try to get that animal positioned in a place where you can work comfortably. And have a hunt plan. Now, we've talked about hunt plans in different classes, and it's brought up in hunter education where you want to tell someone where you're going, where you're going to be hunting, when you plan to get back. Are you going to take a lunch break? Are you not? And the hunt plan also needs to include what your plans are for getting your harvested animal out of the field. So, and that's going to help you plan, okay, do I need to take a cooler? Do I have access to ice? Do I have a buddy on call that is going to come help me nearby? Things like that. So include the non-traditional things that you may not consider the post-harvest event in your hunt plan when you make one. All right, so let's talk about this equipment. Really, all you need.
Sorry, Becky.
Yep.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Everybody, I'm emailing the group to see if anybody that is not joined in is having trouble logging in. So those of you all that are here, just disregard this email. Sorry, Becky. Go ahead.
Thank you, Brent.
You're welcome.
All right. So really, all you need to be successful with field dressing is a sharp knife, disposable gloves, and a rope, or more than one rope, but rope in general. Of course, a sharp knife, and I keep looking behind me because I have stuff I'm going to show you up close, but if your knife is sharp, you're going to be more safe. You're not going to have to apply a bunch of pressure and possibly slip or anything like that. So make sure you sharpen your knives yourself or take your knife to get sharpened. And just because it just came from the store and it's fresh out of the package does not mean it's sharp. So definitely take the time, ask a friend or do it yourself to sharpen your knives. And you can use some kits come with a knife. So this is an Outdoor Edge Wild Pack. And it's a really nice kit that's actually not that expensive. And it comes with a couple different blades, a saw, the rib spreader, which we're going to talk about in a second, but also a knife sharpener. And so this is like not a knife sharpener that maybe you use on your kitchen knives, but for in the field, this is going to work perfectly. You slide the blade down in here, and you pull it along. You actually want to pull it kind of away from yourself, like that. So some kits have these, and some of them look a little different. Some of them have the porcelain rod and the other rod. Sorry, I can't remember what that's made out of. But if you do have both, you're going to use the rough one first. I think it's like a carbide type thing. And then the porcelain. Rough first, then smooth. And these are really handy because they already have the edge angle cut into them. So that you don't have to worry about measuring that out or anything like that. Disposable gloves to protect you and your meat. And of course, rope. Rope can be anything. I like to take rope that is not going to stretch on me. So paracord and some other nylon ropes may stretch and may not actually be as helpful as you want them to be, especially if you're trying to drag the deer using the rope. And if it stretches on you, it's kind of working against you. So this is like the marine quality rope. It's made out of a plastic, so this isn't going to stretch as much. when pressure's applied to it. All right, and some optional, there's tons of optional gear here. Not every knife has to have a gut hook for field dressing, even though it kind of sounds like it should. It's just an option. This is one of my favorite knives, and I'll talk a little bit more about it in a minute, but this is one of my favorite knives for field dressing, mostly because it fits my hand really well. I have a really small hand. And
Becky,
so,
I'm going to pause you real quick again. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'm seeing a lot of squinting and stuff. As you're going through some of these knives and things, do you mind pulling it off a screen share so that we can see on speaker view?
Yeah, let's do it.
You're the best.
Okay. If you do put me on speaker view, you can see me in full screen. Does everybody, that sound good to everyone? Okay. So this is the knife I was showing you. This is a knife that I prefer to use when field dressing, just because it's got a shorter blade and it fits my hand really well. It does not have a gut hook, but I stole my husband's knife that does have a gut hook on it. And that's this little piece here. It is actually sharp, and you do actually want to sharpen it regularly, just like the other side of the blade. When I first learned how to use a gut hook, I was really fighting against myself. The best angle when you're using the gut hook is to lay the handle right against the hide. So you're not torquing up away from the animal, you're just following the hide and the hair straight down. So you don't want to, if you create this angle, you're kind of wrenching and you're not letting the blade actually cut for you. So keep your hand and the back of your knife close to the animal when you're using a gut hook. I just need to split my screen so I can see what's next here. Sorry, guys. All right, a bone saw. This is my favorite bone saw. It's a little Gerber bone saw. It's super short, super compact. This is all you need. You do not need anything that's really long. And let me, if I can, check out the teeth on this monster. This is what a bone saw should look like. It has really large teeth. It's going to grip really well. It cuts both ways, which is important on a saw. And that's what makes it a little bit different than like other hand saws that you might just have in your garage. I've used the wrong saw before, and it's really more trouble than it's worth. So make sure you get one that's made to cut bone. I pointed out the rib spreader earlier. So this is a super handy thing, a piece of equipment, especially if you are doing this alone. If you choose to split the brisket, to split the rib cage, this will be placed, once you unfold it, like this, to hold the rib cage apart. So one side of the rib cage would be here, the other side would be here, and the pressure will actually spread it apart so that you can see better and be able to work a little bit easier. So if you're going to do this alone, this came in the Outdoor Edge kit. It also comes in other kits too. I recommend the rib spreader if you're going to be out in the field on your own field dressing. I do not have the butt out big game field dressing tool. It is exactly what you could imagine it is by the name. There is only one brand that I could tell, and it is called the butt out tool. So you basically insert that into the rectum, and it has teeth that are facing the opposite direction, so it's easy to put in. And then when you pull it out, it pulls the large intestine with it, and you can tie it off and cut it a little bit easier. I've used one, and it does work the way that it's supposed to. And then we've got the game bags or clean pillowcases. This is if you plan on processing your deer before, or your elk, before you get back to camp or where you're going to be breaking the meat down even farther. You definitely want game bags or clean pillowcases to keep the, oh, Alex says she has the butt out tool. But the game bags or the pillowcases will keep the meat clean. It'll allow it to dry. It'll keep bugs off of it. I have some here. I mean, you can get these at Dick's or Cabela's. These are deer quarter bags. Nothing super fancy. It's kind of like it's a thin cloth, and it has a drawstring on it. You don't want to use the game bags twice. Those are disposable, but your pillowcases you can wash if you want to.
Becky, can you expand on the butt out tool just a little bit, please? Well, yeah, go ahead. Tell them what exactly it is.
Yes. So, and Alex may be able to jump in too and help since she uses one. It is a piece of plastic. It's about yay long. It has a handle on one end. It is like a staff with, and on the front side, I guess, opposite the handle, there are some prongs that protrude out. So you'll insert it into the rectum. Those prongs grab onto the large intestine, and when you pull it out, it pulls the large intestine with it, so that you can easily work on the backside of the tool, tie it off, and cut it, separate the rectum from the meat. I hope that was a little bit of a better explanation. I wonder.
I'm sharing a picture of one on the chat right now, y'all.
Perfect. Thank you, Brent. Do you pull all the intestines out, or just part? I believe it's just the part that's immediately there. So once you tie it off, good question. So once you tie it off, and you've separated the fat around the rectum, you will then you'll kind of wiggle that tool off of the intestines and leave it, because once you get the rest of the internal organs separated, you actually pull it back through the pelvis and out with all the rest of the intestines. But what you've done is tied it off, so now you're not going to lose anything that was digested in the intestines because it's tied up. Did that help a little bit, Heather? Awesome, thanks. Okay. And then, so Donna, I do see your comment here, and yes, we're going to talk about just cutting around it in the video that I have to demonstrate. We'll show that option. So the butt out tool is not necessary, it's just an optional piece of equipment. I don't use one regularly, but it is kind of handy. And Brent's working on a picture. So I'm going to go through the last couple pieces of equipment, and then we might circle back around to that one. Sealable gallon bags. So for me, I take this field dressing. It might sound like you need this later, but I take it field dressing because I like to keep the heart, and I have been known to keep the liver to eat. The heart is an amazing cut of meat, and it's not actually that hard to clean either. So it doesn't have a gamey flavor, and in my experience, and it has the texture of a really tender cut of beef. So if you're interested in trying that out, I highly recommend it, and I've fed it to other people that really love it. Oh, heart jerky. That sounds awesome. I have not done that, Tabitha, but that sounds really good. A tarp, you can lay a tarp down before you start working on your animal, just to kind of create that extra barrier between it and the ground. Or you might, I have quartered out an elk, and we just laid the quarters on the tarp, on a clean tarp, not a tarp from the garage that has motor oil on it or anything. But you can lay those out in the shade to get them cooling and keep them clean. The Gut Daddy, I'm really excited to show this to you guys. I haven't used it yet, but this is another piece of equipment that I recommend if you are going to be hunting alone. Let me grab it. It's on the floor.
While she's grabbing that, y'all, I just emailed you all a link to the Cabela's butt out tool. So you can see it on your email now.
Okay. So this is the Gut Daddy. I actually have it unfolded, and this is how it would look when you had it laying on the ground. And ultimately, the back of the animal would lay right down here, and then you would either have the front legs or the back legs. Adjust the camera a little bit. Up here. And there's a chain that creates a loop, and you would stick the feet through. So this is going to help hold the feet open and keep the animal positioned on its back, which actually is an optimal position for field dressing. So this is great. They actually use pronghorn a lot on their advertising because there's not a lot of trees out west. In Kentucky, we typically don't have any shortage of trees. So you can also forego buying the Gut Daddy and just tie the legs off to 2 or 4 trees, something like that. But it's pretty nice, pretty compact. It just folds up on itself. Like that. And you just pack it in the field. Not too big, not heavy. Something just kind of different for you. All right. And the last piece of equipment I had up there was a headlamp, because if you are working on an animal, especially alone, and the sun starts to set, you'll be very glad that you can see where the knife is versus where your fingers are. So headlamp is an excellent option, or a hat, clip, light, that would work too. All right, let's go. Actually, I'm going to talk about the next slide, and then I'll pull it back up and start screen sharing again. But it's because I'm going to be talking about the skinning knife specifically. So let me get mine back out really quick, and I want to show you guys the skinning knife specifically. So my skinning knife that I told you I really like, something you might notice right away is how wide, how deep the belly of this knife is. That is very excellent for field dressing, is having this deep and broad belly on this knife. It's also, we already talked about, it's not very long, fits my hand really well, which is a huge deal for me. I don't like using knives that are way big because then and notice how I put my finger up here. That's so that I can feel exactly where that knife blade is going to go. And so if I'm working and I am up in the cavity and I can't see both of my hands, I can feel where I'm pointing the knife blade. So it's going to be a short, stiff knife. High carbon steel, if you're going to get real particular with your knife blades, is better, because it gets a little bit sharper and holds its edge longer. And if you choose a folding blade, make sure that you clean the folding components, and you have to oil it to keep it in good operation. I personally don't ever use a folding blade hunting, but it is an option, and they can be a little bit easier to pack. Make sure, if you do choose a folding blade, make sure it locks when it opens. So that's just a safety thing. And so the deep belly offers a long cut and more cutting surface per stroke. And you can also, like we talked about before, get the ones, you see this one also has a deep belly on it, and it has the gut hook option. I have two knives that I really like. Neither of mine have a gut hook on them, but it is nice to have if you have that option. I almost forgot to, while I'm still talking about it, you can actually buy your gut hook completely separate. So this little thing is a Mossy Oak brand. It's called the Field Dressing Knife. So no mystery there on the name, but ultimately this is going to be the gut hook without the rest of the blade. Now, this plastic is really lightweight, so really it doesn't add much to your backpack if you want to take one of these and one of these. All right, I think I'm going to start screen sharing again back to the PowerPoint, because you all need to fill in your blanks too, if you want. Okay. Okay, I'll give you a second to get caught up there on the blanks. We've got the skinning knife is short and stiff and fat. Something I hadn't mentioned, you definitely don't want to use your skinning knife to chop with, because you're going to dull the blade, and there's just far better tools to use for splitting the rib cage, like the saw. You can also choose to use a small hatchet, which I have my little SOG hatchet here. Not very big, not very long, will do the job. It's an optional piece of equipment if you want to use the hatchet to split the rib cage. Practicing on small game is definitely going to help build your confidence before you start field dressing big game. So something I recommend. Or you can just dive right in. That's cool too. And field dressing a freshly harvested animal is definitely way easier than letting a deer sit. And I'm going to talk to you more about bloat in a second. It has a lot to do with the anatomy of the deer or the elk. So not only is it easier, but it's also pretty critical to keep the meat from spoiling. All right, ready to move on? Okay. So here's another question you all can answer in the chat for me. Do you consider yourself not a hunter, a new or novice hunter? And I couldn't decide between beginner or intermediate, but I went with beginner. Or do you consider yourself an expert hunter? And I still can't see the chat, doggone it.
So far, we're getting a lot of B's and C's.
Okay, new, novice, beginner, intermediate type hunters.
Yep. So
Awesome.
far, no A's and no D's.
Okay. Well, cool. Then you're in the right place.
It's a perfect crowd.
Yes. All right. So, I told you I'd talk about the anatomy a little bit. I'm really excited, and I hope all of you anatomy nerds out there are too. The vital organs on a deer or an elk are the heart and the lungs, mostly. And then the liver is also, I include the liver into the vital organs. If you are a little too far back, a little too far back on the animal, you can hit the liver and along with the lungs and still have a really good shot. Some of the non-vital organs are the stomach, the intestines, the reproductive organs, the kidneys. That's what we're not aiming for. And so I talked about a fresh harvest being easier to field dress, and that's because deer and other large game like elk and pronghorn, antelope, bison, moose, caribou, they're all a part of the ruminant family. And so a ruminant they've got a foregut, and then right before they have the true glandular stomach like we do. And if you have cows, then you know this as well, because cows are they're in the same family. And what's going on there is there's these little microorganisms are helping break down plant matter in a very efficient way for these animals before it enters the true stomach. And so they're able to get a lot more nutrition out of plant material than like we are. So what happens in the foregut, what happens in the chambers before the true stomach is the little microorganisms are munching away, breaking down all the plant material, but they're also creating a gas. And so ruminants are constantly burping. I don't know if you spent any time around cows, you know this. They're so rude. And so they expel this gas, but when you have harvested the animal, obviously the gas is not escaping. So it just builds up and it creates pressure. The stomach begins to bloat, and it's going to be a lot harder to work around a bloated stomach than it is one that hasn't had time to bloat. And when I'm talking about time here, I'm not talking very long at all before it starts bloating. It's basically happens immediately. It starts to expand, and the longer it sits and the warmer it is outside, the more it is going to bloat and the harder it's going to be to field dress. All right. Oh, so on my graphic here, you have all of the organs, and then to show the vital organs, all of the non-vital organs are taken away, and you're just left with the heart and the lungs. And I was hoping that this graphic would help show you where they're located a little bit as an introduction there. And hopefully, was everybody able to access the virtual portal? Because I think I had this on there too. I don't know if people were able to get to that before the class or not. All right, so we're going to talk about shot placement. And the reason I talk so much about shot placement in this class is because if you don't make a good shot, then it's going to be that much messier when you're field dressing. And it's going to, it can compromise the meat if you don't make a good shot and you've shot something non-vital like the stomach or the intestines. So I talk a lot about shot placement here. I do realize that between the technical difficulties and waiting on some people to join, I might have to pick up the pace here. So bear with me. The best shot angle that you're going to want to aim for is broadside. So that's what this picture is depicting. There are a couple of different other shot angles that are still good shots, and then there are some that are not. So we're going to talk about quartering towards, quartering away, straight on, and facing away. The reason I've got some pictures here that I want to show you. The reason I chose to do that is because when I was learning how to hunt, those were just rattled off to me, and I had no visualization of what that actually meant in the field. So that's what I've attempted to bring to the table today. So here's a decent quartering away picture. And really fast in the chat, or you can just do a thumbs up if you think this is a good shot. And if you don't think it's a good shot, you can put in the chat. I'll give you a couple seconds here, 30 seconds. So.
Is that equipment specific, Becky, or just in general?
Good question. Let's start with just in general. Okay, so this I would consider a good shot if you're confident about where the vitals are. Notice that this deer, though, is alert. So his tail's up, he's kind of high stepping it, and his ears are facing back, which means he's listening behind him. And you can kind of see he's like looking over his shoulder. So this is a decent shot, and I would place the shot there, archery or firearm, depending on what range he was in. And but I also may let this guy go on and wait for a deer that isn't so wigged out, and because a deer that's on high alert like this may hear your string if you're using a bow or crossbow, and he may jump the string, which could misplace your shot. So just some considerations there. I'll go ahead and talk about this one. Broadside is, remember, the one we definitely want, but consider this. Look at the placement of the front leg that is closest to us. Notice how far back that shoulder blade is, and it's basically blocking all of the vital organs. So alternately, you want to wait till you see something, till he takes a couple more steps and you see something like this, where he's rotated that shoulder forward and opened up the lungs and the heart, and I would place my shot right behind the shoulder blade, archery or firearm. And I do apologize. I just feel like it's worth mentioning that I have so many big buck pictures because that's what's popular on the internet, but I'm definitely a meat hunter. So not to sway anybody and think that you should only be hunting bucks. You can't eat the antlers. So whatever you want, though. All right. So we've got a quartering towards good shot, bad shot option here. This is actually a pretty interesting angle on this doe. And if you are considering the method of take, I would aim here if I was using archery equipment and if I was confident in my shot. That's a pretty small angle there, but it would be a great heart shot. If I was using a firearm, I could also take this shot, or if I wasn't concerned about the shoulder deflecting the arrow, you could go there. Good shot, bad shot. I'm just curious what you all think in the chat on this one. Yes or no? Or you can shake your head. Either way, I can see a few of you. All right. What do they think, Brent? Oh, Michael, if you want to come off mute, and it looks like you raised your hand. Or maybe you didn't mean to.
Sorry, I was thinking neck shot on that one.
A neck shot? Okay, interesting point of view. I like that, and I appreciate you sharing. So typically, I don't talk about neck shots and head shots with new hunters. They are an option. It is a decent ethical shot if you're confident in it, and it will work. But typically for newer hunters, I just pretty much say no go on this guy. There's no real good angle into the heart or the lungs, which is a bigger target than the neck and the head, and it moves a lot less, which is kind of why I steer away from the other parts of the deer. And if you took a shot here and you happen to go in between the shoulders or through a shoulder, you would probably also wind up going through the stomach, which isn't an awesome shot. So that guy's going to go home. This quartering away shot, notice how steep, how sharp this angle is on this deer. You can actually see, I don't know if you guys can see my mouse, but his rib cage is kind of protruding out here. And so even if I really wanted to make this shot, I might wind up nicking the stomach. And I wanted to bring this up for other big game too. If this was an elk or a moose, you really wouldn't be able to make a clean shot here. So we'll wait for a quartering away position that's more like this. and he opens up that pocket really nicely for archery or firearms, and you can go straight through to the heart or the lungs. Okay, what are the 3 main factors of meat spoilage? Somebody come off mute and tell me.
Heat.
Meat spoilage, heat. Meat, and then if you like, I guess cut into one of like the stomach, or another thing I saw was if you use the same knife as when you're using cutting off the tarsal glands. You use the same knife when you're cutting off the tarsal glands, you can spoil the meat that way.
Yeah, Caitlin, you've got some really great points there. And Donna, you said heat too. Those are all good points. But what I was really going for there was heat, dirt, and moisture are the 3 main contributing factors. And so if you think about dirt, could also be your knife being soiled from cutting into glands or into the stomach. But good job, everybody. Yeah, excellent. All right. I am going to skip the meat spoilage part, and I'll send you the slides, but we're kind of running out of time here. So, and I know there's not a lot of time between classes either. So let's dive straight into the field dressing part, which is why you all came. Sorry it took us so long to get here. The first step you're going to do is separate the rectum. So we kind of already talked about this, and I hope that this graphic helps a little bit. You can separate the rectum, tie the anus closed, which keeps the large intestine together and reduces meat being exposed to bacteria. And it also, keeps your knife clean. A pro tip is using a skinnier knife for that. So I have an option here. This knife isn't nearly it's not very long still, so you don't really need a long knife, but it is skinnier than the other field dressing knives that I've shown. So you may have more than one knife option. It just makes it a little bit easier. So let me pause that. We will move over to our video. Maybe. Oh, here we go.
Powering on. Welcome to Alltech Lansing.
All right. So this video, these guys are working on an elk in the field. And they've broken the video up, which is why I really like it. So this very first short video is just the ream and core, like we talked about.
So when you start field dressing, there's 2 ways to do it. You can either put it right down, or you can ream out what we call ream and core, so that we can pull it back through. And that's often the easiest way if you're in the field and don't have a lot of tools. You can cut around the anus. Take that loose skin off. See that? And go right around it. Grab it and pull it out so that it stretches. It makes it easier. And then this loose tissue in here is still attached. You got to loosen all that fatty stuff. Come right around it entirely so that it'll pull through from the inside. Just about there. Feel it, it sort of lets go in. There it is. So that should be ready to go.
Okay, that was a little.
Now, lots of guys, when they field dress an animal.
Sorry, that was a little dark. Could you hear it okay? Yes, I'm getting heads. Yes. Okay. Excellent. It was quick, but the main things that he talked about was cutting the fat around the anus and separating the rectum from the rest of the body there. And so what he does then is pull it out and tie it off, and it'll be ready to go straight through. And you saw he's just kind of, it's not beautiful. It's really a carving process. And you just kind of start. Let me go back to my PowerPoint here because it had a great graphic. You're starting, see where they insert the knife right on the outside. So you're not actually puncturing the anus, but you are just working a kind of giving it a buffer.
We're still seeing the paused YouTube video, Becky. We're not seeing what you're showing us.
Thanks, Brent.
No problem.
Transferring over now. Now you see the photo?
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay. So that's what I was talking about. The knife is inserted on the outside, and you're going to make sure that you're not angling too deep. You're just going to go straight in because if you have an angle on it, you will puncture the intestines. Okay. I'm glad that worked out. Okay, so next we're going to talk about the split. Remember I said a good position is to have the deer on its back. You want to tie 2 of the legs off or have a buddy hold them just to give you a little bit more space to work. I always begin at the top of the sternum, and that's what our video is going to show. This graphic here shows starting at the bottom near the reproductive organs. There's no right or wrong answer. There really is 100 different ways to skin a cat. So whatever you practice and you're comfortable with, I like to start at the top of the sternum or at the middle of the sternum because the sternum bone will keep me from cutting too far deep and puncturing organs when I'm starting. Do we have some questions coming up, Brent? I didn't know. Okay.
No,
All right.
I mean, we got just a little bit of chatter, but we're good.
Okay, excellent. So you're going to pinch the hide, angling the knife so that you're cutting from the inside out, being careful not to cut too deep, and working all the way down to the anus. And so let's transfer over to our next short video. All right, I know you can't hear anything yet. I'm going to catch him up. So this picks right back up where he finished reaming and coring.
They start at the bottom and cut up. But I was taught years ago from an old German fella that if you cut across those hairs, they're all going to come out of the belly. And you can see how the hairs run here. So normally you find which direction they run and cut with it. You'll have a whole lot less hair in it. So again, you take the sharp part of your knife, hold to the skin. You don't have to go deep right in it. And then just run it. The trick here is to cut from the skin side up. See how I work my knife under there and pull it up? That way, if you look closely, there's actually no loose hair coming out of that elk. There'll be no hair in here.
Okay. I realize this is buffering. I hope the internet holds up for me. So some things he's really touched on that are really important. Cutting from the inside out, it reduces how you cutting through hair. Cutting through hair is going to dull your knife. So you want to do that. You want to not do that as much as possible. And then he mentioned cutting in the same direction that the hair is going so that you're not cross-cutting it and basically like shaving it and creating bunches of little hairs. So that's what he was talking about right there. I'm just gonna, oh. I'm just checking my internet connection really quick. Let's see if he'll go.
So it helps to keep them a lot cleaner. Just nice and slow, sharp knife. Under, cut up, under, cut up, under, cut up. And we're starting to gear up to, we know our tag is on the right-hand side here. So we're going to want to leave the evidence of sex on the right-hand side. We're just going to come around it.
I'm gonna let him catch up to his voice. He's talking about leaving evidence of sex on the elk because they're in a different, I think they're in Canada, and that's something you have to do. You also have to do in Kentucky is leave evidence on the hide or on the animal. So that's what he's doing here.
Now, these bulls, if they were rutting, they'd probably be pretty smelly. I'd actually cut this whole chest plate off and throw it out. No, not yet. He's not. I think they're just starting to rut. But we want to take this cut all the way down to the bottom end. Again, we're still cutting width. See how those hairs are growing in that direction? And when we cut through, there's no loose hairs falling out, which actually helps to keep it clean when you go to butcher it. So under the skin, pull up, so you're cutting from the skin side up, under the skin, up.
And all the way down to the anus. Questions so far? Sorry, I know this is a little jumpy.
Yeah, Becky, what did you say again? The difference between like starting at the sternum opposed to the rectum when you're doing that part?
It's purely preference, Jessica, whatever you've practiced. And, but I did say if you start at the sternum, the chest will keep you from cutting into the organs. So you kind of start on a side that's going to be a little bit more gracious to practicing. Good question. All right. Sorry, we're going to be doing a little bit more back and forth. Is there anybody that absolutely, we can probably just do the videos and go back to the PowerPoint later.
I didn't know you're supposed to leave proof of sex on them.
Yeah. I should have highlighted that in my field guide. So, and that's another thing why you need to fill out your harvest log before you touch the animal, before you move it, before you start processing it, all that good stuff.
I'm fortunate. I'm hunting 200 yards from my house.
Yeah, that's definitely.
I'm very lucky. You know, I know I am, but I can't remember if I know I cut around the butt, and I cut up around his penis. I'm not so sure if I didn't cut it and toss it. But he had antlers, so it was a boy.
Yeah.
And that's the kicker is proof of sex is antlers are count as proof of sex as well. So it's just when you're dealing with the meat separate from the antlers. Sorry, Becky.
No, please. I'm trying to catch up here.
Yeah, yeah. You just anything that would give you proof of sex will work, and so antlers will work as long as you keep it all together.
Yeah. I'm not skinning it, and I'm just killing it, gutting it, and hauling it.
All right, we're going to move on here with the videos. Let him catch up.
Now, if you want, you can actually open this up and come down along the penis, right to the pelvic. Pelvis is right here, it's a piece of bone, and some people like to split that with a saw, and you can lift all of that out. That's also a very easy way to do it. But if you didn't have a saw or a hatchet, the ream and core is also a a very good way. Just going to loosen some of this and bring it to one side. Again, don't cut through the hair. Careful what you're doing. See how clean that all stays? There's not any hair in there at all yet. Check from this inside always with the knife. Nice and clean. We're not going to open them up real far because if we have to drag them through any brush or something, he's going to get dirty. So we'll do a lot of that back at camp. On the brisket here, again, you can open it right to the brisket bone. And then where the bone is, you can feel it get soft. That's over the paunch or the stomach. That's where you can use a gut hook to get in there, but we don't have one today. So the old-fashioned way is to just start a little hole like I did. Get your fingers underneath. Just run your blade up between your fingers so that you don't cut into any of that stomach. And that's the easiest way to actually open them up without causing a mess. Get your hands in there and push it down. Cut from underneath, cut up. Don't stick your knife in there and start pushing. It won't work. You'll cut something you don't want to. Sometimes it's hard if you've been sitting around. This guy was sitting ruminating, so his stomach is swollen up. It's a little bit tougher to do. Right to the back.
All right, so hopefully you heard him repeat some things that I had already mentioned about bloat and you notice that he talked about where the sternum ends and where the chest or the abdominal section starts to open up is going to be, you can actually feel that just like on yourself where your sternum ends. So he made a little bitty hole, got his fingers in there, and was operating with the knife facing up, using his hand to push down on the guts, and he was operating like this. So that's how I do it, and using one hand to push the guts back in is the most optimal way to do it. And it's okay if you nick things. It does happen. If you do, I'll go ahead and mention this now in the interest of time. If you do accidentally nick the guts, that's the only point when you want to bring water with you and to rinse that section off. You don't want to let those chemicals sit on the meat. And if it does get discolored or anything and you don't feel safe about it, about keeping that little section, if it looks discolored, you can just trim it out and discard that. But you don't want to habitually rinse the entire cavity of the deer if you don't have to, because remember, excess moisture actually causes bacteria. Something else, and if you're taking Alex's cooking class, he may talk about this. When you're packaging your meat, you actually you can rinse it to get all the hair and excess anything else you have on it before you package it, but you also want to dab the meat dry with paper towels before you put it either in your vacuum seal bag or your freezer wrap or anything like that. Sorry.
All the way, you can see we're right down into the pelvis here, where we started our cut. Right there. So you're all the way through. And if we reamed them out all the way, we'll be able to pull that right through and out to the side. I normally come back up to the diaphragm here and just open it up, give it some breathing space is basically what you're looking for. So that you can get in there and get under that stomach and pull on it a bit. Sometimes you actually roll it out to the side. So that's all right. Like that. So there's the brisket there. If I had a saw, I would just saw that open right now. Pull this out a bit and find the diaphragm. Diaphragm is in the now. It's right there.
So he hasn't cut
See
the
inside there?
brisket.
That membrane that's holding the liver on this side with the stomach is the diaphragm. So because there's a nice wide opening there, go back in on the other side. Some of it I feel isn't always great if you've never done this before. Lots of blood in there. I shot him right through the lungs, top of the heart probably, where he's buried. Fat that holds on the back of the kidneys. Good. Okay.
All right, we're gonna go right into the next video and then I'll pause for questions. But some things he was talking about there is that he was reaching in. I don't know if you could see the diaphragm. I felt like on my end I could see it really well, which is why I chose these videos. But when he cut the diaphragm, you kind of heard the air that was in the chest, trapped in the chest cavity, come out. And then he said, you know, I made a good clean shot, so there was lots of blood trapped up there, and the diaphragm goes all the way around the rib cage. So he did puncture it, but you do have to work all the way around to the back. And so what I usually do is do one side and then muscle or flip the guts from the other side and go around the other way and meet in the back along the spine. And I do apologize that I'm keeping you guys late. I'm going to try and end in the next 10 minutes. So I'm trying to be courteous of everyone's time here.
Are you able to see? Sorry, you're trying to be courteous and end quickly, and I'm interrupting you. Are you able to see the question that Jessica posted in the chat?
I cannot see it.
Okay. So when he was digging, and what was he trying to get in the back of the animal? It's a membrane that holds it all together. Is her question?
Yes. So there's lots of fat that's holding all of the organs to the spine, and so that's what he's trimming. And when he's working down the spine, behind the stomach, behind the liver, he's just trimming fat membranes.
And you are sharing these videos with us later on, correct?
Yes, 100%. You guys will have these to go back to. I promise. I won't keep all the good resources just to myself. All right.
But I'll show you also how to do it with a saw. And there it splits. I mean, this is by far the easiest way to do it. You can even split it with a hatchet. And you can see this elk's been feeding well, so it's the actual fat that's holding this in there for him. And your knife blade, mine came in.
Okay. Sorry. So he's cutting the, there he goes. He was cutting the pelvic bone to open up that area where the rectum and the large intestine is. And you can tell he's actually having to trim up some more of the fat that was holding the large intestine in place. You don't have to split the pelvic bone. It is just an option.
About that far, and that's where I loosened it too. But there's still some fat in here, so we'll just loosen that off through the pelvis. And lift it right out. So there it is. That part's done.
So the extra white stuff that you could see, that's all fat. And that's why he's just kind of hacking at that. Because it's not the intestines, it's not going to harm anything. It's just a bunch of fat.
got most of the stomach out here. And what we'll do is we'll roll them up and show you how to saw the brisket open. All right. You can see that stomach's already out most of the way. And if you had 2 people to work on this, you could just cut that diaphragm out. But this actually splits very easily. There it is. It's nice that I have some help today. I got some guys pulling them open. You can see here's the lungs. Here's the
Any questions? Oh, well, let's get through this here.
part on the bottom. You basically have to loosen all this stuff holding it in. And if we go all the way up to the esophagus, we can cut it off and use it as a handle to pull things back out. There it is. What I like to do is just poke a finger hole in it so that you can get a hold of it and pull. Once again, most of that tissue is just going to have some fat on the back side of it. Just loosen that off. Normally release it coming out. And there's the rest of the stomach out. And here's the rest of his diaphragm. So we continue to cut up the diaphragm. Right there. There's part of the liver I opened up. Here's the rest of the diaphragm there. It should just all roll right out. There it is, real good. Of course, you go back in the small of the back here, and that's where the kidneys sit. Here's one of the kidneys.
Sorry about the wind on towards the end of that one. But I'm going to stop sharing here for a second. So that was kind of quick. I did not want to rush that. I really do apologize. Questions so far, and I'm going to navigate back to the PowerPoint here. All right, so hopefully there's no questions because you feel good about it. I am going to share these videos for sure. I hope you noticed that towards the end there, he did have to go back and trim out the rest of the diaphragm. So he just waited till he was able to roll the rest of the stomach out and he could actually see that diaphragm. And yes, he did tear the liver, but remember the liver is actually an organ that you can choose to eat if you like liver. By the way, deer liver tastes like chicken liver. So if you like chicken liver, go for it.
Donna and Jessica, go ahead and expand on the questions y'all are having in the chatter. Sorry.
Yes.
Becky, I think this is good for everybody to hear.
Okay.
Donna, go ahead.
When he got up there to the bone, is that the same knife that he used everywhere else? I could not cut that bone last year. I just had to take and get all up in there.
Right. No. Yes. So you don't have to open up the sternum. No, that wasn't the knife that he was using the whole time. He switched out for a saw. And I showed you my little saw earlier. I'll show you this saw real quick. This is the saw that comes in the Outdoor Edge Wild Pack. So it's a little bit longer, but this is what he was using when he cut the sternum. I've seen people use a stiff blade or stiff back knife. It's just not worth the effort. I think it's pretty dangerous. Go ahead and use a saw.
I didn't know last year at all, and I just had to literally get in it up to my neck, you know, trying to feel around and going, yeah, I don't have no idea what I'm doing.
Right, which is
Maybe this year it'll just be come to the house and get the Sawzall and go at it.
that's an option too, if you want to, Donna.
The question about your splitting down the middle, though, Donna, what was that?
Well, that's what I had wondered. Right down the middle of the bone or off to one side?
Okay, yes. So when you're sawing, it's easier. It really doesn't matter. It's probably, if you go off to one side, then you're going to be cutting each individual rib. I would just recommend trying to stay centered and cut that sternum in half.
Gotcha.
Good question. Yeah, good question. And Jessica had a question.
That was all part of that same conversation. You got us there, Becky. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Or,
yeah.
well, Jess, unless you wanted to elaborate on that, but I think that it was it.
Okay. Yeah, it was a couple of years before I started actually splitting the sternum. I started learning. I did everything I guess you could consider the hard way. I had my dad to help me most of the time, but we didn't cut the pelvis and we didn't cut the sternum. And like Donna says, you just kind of get elbow deep and you have
neck deep.
Yeah.
Tell me all about it. It was neck deep. Why is it better to pull all of the guts to a side or bring them straight out the back?
Another good question. So some people do kind of push the guts down and out in between the back legs, but I have always rolled my deer to one side. And because like I said, I hunted on private land that was in the knob country of Kentucky, and we were always on a hill somewhere.
Yeah.
So I would roll so that those guts would just roll down the hill. Other questions before we wrap up? We got 2 minutes, and I officially kept you all for a half hour longer than we were supposed to. So some
Heather had a question.
Okay.
Go ahead, Heather.
I was just wondering if the pooling blood in the cavity was from the original shot, or is it always like that?
Great question. That was from the shot. And when you noticed when he was trimming up in the back, he kind of around the genitals, he cut a pretty large vein that kind of let loose of some blood. But all the blood that was in the chest cavity was from the shot. It looked like a heart shot to me. Probably hit a lung too. But the lungs actually had air in them until he cut the esophagus, which I thought was pretty interesting. And I never learned to put a hole in the esophagus to hook my finger and pull it out. That's something new I'll probably do because it's kind of slick, to be honest. So that just gives you a little extra grip. I thought that was pretty cool. Okay, some post-field dressing considerations. The option is to spread the animal open and lay its stomach down so that the rest of the blood can drain out. You saw he just kind of swept it out down the back of the animal. No, if you're hunting on public land in Kentucky, the law is just to, if you're quartering and leaving back behind the stuff that you're not going to eat or field dressing in the field, the thing you have to do is just put it out of public view. So you don't want to leave it on a trail or on the road. You just have to kind of put it where it's reasonably not going to be expected to be seen by the public. And if you're hunting on private land that's not your own, make sure you ask the landowner. Some people may want you to bury the gut pile, but honestly, I've never seen one last more than half a day because the other critters or overnight, it'll never last overnight. So there are things out there that really enjoy that. If you're dragging out the animal, make sure that you are not dragging it with the chest cavity open against the ground because you'll just collect dirt and leaves in the chest cavity. And that's dirt, heat, and moisture, the three things you want to avoid. And like we talked about, you can choose to keep the heart and the liver and the kidneys to eat. I've never tried the kidneys. If you do, or if you have, let me know how that goes. These are some, These are some additional resources, and they will include the videos that I've used today. And if nobody has any other questions, thank you so much for hanging in there with me. Oh my gosh. I apologize.
No, Becky, the class is actually supposed to go till noon, so
Really?
you're good. Yeah, noon Eastern, 11 Central. Yep.
Well, never mind. Thanks for staying the whole class the time was scheduled.
Wait, good job ending on time, Becky.
I planned it this way. Can you tell? Oh, man. Yeah, thanks, Michael, for joining us. Oh, don't leave till we take a picture.
When you're dragging out a deer, and you put something over the cavity to kind of protect it.
Great question, Michael. Yes, you can. Typically, I don't. I typically, if I drag a deer, it's on the side, and it's just kind of it's laying on its hide, which I have not removed yet. And that I don't usually have any problems gathering dirt or leaves if it's on its side. You can also use something called a deer cart and strap your deer to that and wheelie mount. In the hills, that's not really that beneficial. It still weighs 100 pounds, even though it's on wheels. I promise. But yeah, good question. You could probably wrap it in a tarp if you wanted to, something like that.
I've never harvested one yet, so I just thought I'd ask.
Yeah, no, very good question.
I'm really looking forward to trying it. My kids just outgrew the jogging stroller that I've been using with them for years. So apparently, according to our director, a jogging stroller makes a fantastic way to haul a deer. So I'm really looking forward to trying that.
Awesome.
That's brilliant.
So let's take a group picture and then let me make sure I can do this here. Hide that. All right, so everybody on 3, give us a big smile and we'll take us a group picture here. 1, 2, 3. Hey, it looks pretty good, y'all.
Heather made sure her dog was in the background for the group picture.
Yes. All right, I'm just saving that. Any more questions before we go? I'm willing to stay if you all need, want to have some more conversation about this. I know the end was a little rushed there.
I don't have any questions, but this after yesterday's class was if any comment for their instructors or for Brent or Olivia or whatever, it's a good idea to email them to you or put them on Facebook or whatever social media platform they use, because it's really good for the instructors to have the feedback. And we don't have a jar this year where we can put them in, so.
That's true. Thanks, Heather. I appreciate it. Yeah, anything you all follow-up questions later or like anything. You get out, you get a deer and you forgot what the first step was, just reach out to me, We've got our Facebook group for new hunters. It's just for new hunters and it's got mentors in it, and you all will get an invitation to join that. And you could always instant message anybody on there or post questions on Michael's in the group. That's and you've been able to ask questions before and get responses from all different backgrounds, all different experience levels of hunters. So I encourage you all to join that once we send you the invite.
Yeah, there's a few out already today hunting and everything. Group chat been blowing up on my phone.
Yeah, we tried. We started a group text for some hunters, and there's like 20 of us in the group, and so my work phone's on silent, thank goodness. But
So is mine, but Jeremy posted some acorns dropping and some scat that he's found.
Nice.
So in the group. So yeah.
Sweet. Well, like I said, y'all are free to go if you are ready to eat lunch or get ready for your next class. Thank you so much for being a part of the big game processing field dressing class.